Okay, good evening. Let's call ourselves to order. It's 7:12. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on local cable channels and on the internet. Some announcements. There is information available at the Senior Center regarding programs managed by the U.S. Department of Labor related to Veterans Employment and Training Service Office, and it's helpful for employers as well as the veterans that are involved in this. It's a relatively long explanation. Angus, do you have like the Cliff Notes version of this at all, or?
Not in substance, just want to say Senator Tarr sent this information last week, and so we wanted to get it out as broadly as we could, and I've asked Teresa to make sure hard copies are available in the Senior Center.
Okay. The summer concert series continues on Thursday evenings, 6:30 to 8 p.m., rain or shine, so it'll be beyond this week. The performers can be, the different performers can be found on the town website. Bicentennial, the big week is coming up very shortly now. It seems amazing, but it is starting a couple days right after the 4th of July, and all sorts of stuff happening for all that week. And another thing, we need, the town will need people to help coordinate some of these events. There's going to be some manual labor, all sorts of help needed to put some of these things on. So again, go on the website, and there's a list of things that the Bicentennial Committee needs volunteers for, and you can contact them from looking at the website. Finally, related to that, still tickets for the West Newbury Day at Fenway Park, which is Friday, August 9th. So now, anything else?
There were a couple of flyers on two specific events that you might want to draw attention to.
Also related to the bicentennial, the Pawtucket Arts Foundation is presenting a screening of the Voices of West Newbury, a public art film with local residents about traditions and lore of West Newbury, directed by Kevin Bowe. That will be. Will that be seen all afternoon, Jen? Is that?
Yes, right now, but we have a special community reception on July 8th.
Okay.
Yeah, everyone's welcome.
So that will be at Old Town Hall on the 8th. The film was made through a partnership with the West Newbury Council on Aging and the library, and support from the Haverhill and Pawtucket Banks, and with the West Newbury Bicentennial Committee and the Pawtucket Arts Organization. On Wednesday, the 10th, another very unique event related to the bicentennial. At the Page School in the cafeteria, there will be from 2 to 6 p.m. By students and what West Newbury means to me. And that's obviously open to everybody. We want people to attend all these great events. Angus, do we want to talk about the grant that we got as an announcement, just to say that we got that, or, because it had been,
Oh, yes, sure, the MVP, yeah.
okay. So the town applied for a grant, and it had been furloughed in terms of us being able to announce it until the state was ready to do so, but the town was successful in receiving funding to get training for members of the town employees on climate change preparedness. So that will there'll be training, and those sessions will start in the next fiscal year. So thank you to all the hard work that everyone put into that, and congratulations.
Yeah, Archie, I might actually,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, maybe to clarify that, because it's not actually training. It's, the name of the program is the MVP, it's a little acronym MVP, which in this case stands for Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. And it's really going to be an evaluation of our climate change risk. So, we'll be looking at it from a lot of different perspectives with a lot of different people from different interest groups involved. So there'll be people from the planning board, from the energy committee, from the Concom, from the Board of Health, pretty much every department in town, plus people who are at large, trying to understand where our risks are, and then ultimately come up with mitigation strategies for the risks that we do assess.
Mr. Chairman, how much was the grant for?
25,000, sorry, if you didn't know.
No, that's
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, we got 25,000, which actually was a good number. We didn't expect that much. I mean, it's not a lot more than we expected, but the minimum was 15, and we kind of figured we were going to be down at the minimum, but, yeah.
Okay, the next thing is the town has entered into and signed a contract with Chief Durand as the new police chief, so that's formally been signed, and that's in effect
As of July 1st.
as of July 1st.
Yeah.
And our next agenda item is appointment of an interim member of the Board of Health, because there is a vacancy.
You didn't even without falling down? All right. Gentlemen, good evening.
Thanks.
First of all, I would like to take just a couple of moments to thank Kim Cole for her 14 years of service on the Board of Health. I didn't realize it had been that long, but she served since 2005. And I wish her all the luck. I think she's moved now to Maine. So I wish her all the best. At this point in time, I would like to nominate Tom Fahey as an interim member of the Board of Health. Tom is a pharmacist and currently works at Beverly Hospital. Tom has participated in the Affordable Housing Committee in town. He is involved in the federal preparedness of infectious diseases, disease and treatment. Because of his medical background and his enthusiasm for the community service, I believe Tom would be an excellent addition to the Board of Health, and therefore I'd like to nominate him as our interim member.
I know Tom somewhat from having worked with him on a committee a bunch of years ago, and Tom's sharp and has good judgment, and at least in my opinion, and clearly has public interest in mind, and I think he'll be a real addition, good addition.
Would this be for what would the term of this be?
It would be, it would be until the next election.
Till the
He would
next
just serve out
election.
the next election in May.
Okay.
And then, obviously, if you would like to continue serving, you'd have to take out nomination papers and run for the 2-year unexpired term.
So yeah, I'd move that we appoint Tom as an interim on the interim to fill, to fill the vacant position on the Board of Health.
Second.
I'll go along with that.
All in favor?
Aye. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
This is Tom Fahey, by the way.
Tom, you sure you want to put up with these two guys?
I wouldn't.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Special permit request for the Apple Harvest race. Hi.
So my name is Courtney Lucy, and this is Kristen Shikes.
Hi.
We are one of 3 people that are running or organizing the Apple Harvest Race, and we wanted to apply for the special permit, I guess, that we are required to do in order to have the race on the date that we would like.
Okay. So I'm just looking at the
Sure.
The liquor license request would be for the evening before event.
Correct, although we were contemplating, and I'm not exactly sure how it works as far as if we were to have a beer truck come the day of the race, if there would be a separate liquor license that would be required for that.
It would be a different vendor?
Same
Oh.
vendor.
Well, Mike, I guess you.
If you're serving liquor on public property, you need to apply it.
For each day.
So there'd be 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had advised Courtney that could be applied for later.
Yep.
Because they didn't want to, go line everything up until they had the date set.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that the first time for a liquor license for the dinner, or is there typically one for the dinner?
Usually one for the dinner.
Yeah, and
First time for
this
the
would be the
race.
first time for the race, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, okay.
Can I ask a question? Do we need a permit for the temporary signs, for the mile markers or apple harvest signs that we put up?
The mile markers, I would think not, because they're just gonna be up for the.
Yeah, you're just putting up for the
day.
day of the event, right?
The announcement signs, if they're gonna go on town property, then yes. If you're gonna be putting them in the, in a median or in a right of way or something like that, then yes, because that's been one of the board's things we're trying to do, is to keep the thousands of signs for every fundraiser and everything out of the medians. That's so on someone's personal property. That's someone that's associated with the race, or someone that's you can do it. That's fine. But on the
As long as they're within the sign bylaw, the size constraints, right? Yeah.
right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you connect with Chief Duran today?
No, so Christina Gentili has a meeting with him. Is that you? Okay. It's on July 5th.
For me?
So as far
Yeah, so on July 5th, she's going to be meeting with the chief of police to go over the race details.
Well, I would say, if all agreed to by the fire department and the police chief, then I'd make a motion to approve the special permit with that, and you'll have to get the additional liquor license permit.
Correct.
Yeah, okay,
Okay, so you made a motion, I'll second.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do you have the maps?
We do.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have the maps too for you,
Okay.
just so you have copies of them.
But it's the same route as,
Yeah,
always,
exactly the same. Yep, nothing's changed.
yeah.
It's not gonna be an ultra marathon.
It is not this time.
Not this year, maybe next.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Have you reserved the rooms, the annex for those days?
Yeah, yes, I put in for the request for use of facilities. Yes.
You can check with the administrative assistant.
Is that Annie?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
Good.
Yes. I spoke with her directly.
Do we have to get a permit for, Action Cove?
Oh,
Through
that's,
Parks and
no,
Recs?
that was our other question.
That's usually used the day of the race.
Right.
I don't recall that ever coming up, but
I would
could
think that's
be
something
wrong.
you'd want to work with Parks and Rec on and make sure that, do you have any
The
thoughts?
property's under the jurisdiction of Parks and
Yeah,
Rec.
yeah.
Obviously, you just check with them.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, great.
But it's not, it's different than using a town facility, like the annex or
Right, right,
Old Town Hall. Yeah.
okay.
okay, street opening permits, we're good.
All right,
Thank
perfect.
you.
Great, thank you. Yeah,
very
thanks a lot.
much.
There are two street opening requests, one for 2 Hilltop Circle, one for 7A Arcalus Hill Road. There seems to be very specific instructions from the DPW director related to these, so I would vote to approve, make a
Yeah,
motion to approve these.
And I'd second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And if I might, Chairman, I just would like to note you're 100% correct, and I want to just publicly recognize the work that Wayne, our director, is doing, because these are really being reviewed as permits with specific conditions. But part of that is also the inspection after the fact, or to make sure things are done, pursuant to the approved permits, and I know he's spending time on that as well. So I just wanted to kind of recognize that I think is a increased level of service that he's bringing to the department, which I think is great.
It's like I said, it's very detailed what he wants. It's very good, yeah.
And as you also know, that's only remains the board's vote required until the Attorney General signs off on the bylaws that were voted at town meeting, at which point it will go to the DPW directly. But so we're still in the transition, probably till what, late August is what we
August
figure.
27th.
August 27th.
90th day.
It's deadline for AG approval.
What do, Brad, are you here for a specific thing on the,
Couple down.
Right after the line item
Meeting
transfer.
with middle high school, okay.
Maybe a little G.
the middle, okay, right, okay. Let's do, okay, it's just, we'll get the line item transfer right out of the way, and then we'll go right to that, okay.
Okay.
The next item is a request for a line item transfer of $400 from the vehicle allowance to the personnel salaries in the assessor's office. Seems completely reasonable request due to having to pay for a part-time additional help that was unforeseen.
And this was voted last Monday by the Finance Committee unanimously.
Okay. So I'd make a motion to approve the request for the $400 line item transfer.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Next is a discussion of the and perhaps creating a memorandum of understanding between the town and the Pentucket District related to the costs associated with permitting inspections at the new regional middle high school. So there, according to the way that the way the town handles situations like that, usually municipal items are not charged for inspectional services, except there is a specific exception for large school projects. And the town is not in the position to want to charge the inspectional services to the district what it would normally be if it was a private project. However, it is anticipated that there will be additional costs for inspections for plumbing, construction, electrical, those kinds of things. And we'd like to make sure that it's not adding additional burden to the inspectional services department. So that's what this memorandum between the town and the district is about. And now we just have to talk about the dollars and cents, basically.
There was, I'll start with, there's two memos in your packet. The first is just reporting that the coordination between the towns is underway with Groveland and West Newbury. Obviously, it's a project site that traverses two municipalities. And so while the extent of work in the Groveland side is much more limited, and it's primarily driven by West Newbury, Concom doesn't have jurisdiction in Groveland and vice versa. Planning board, it looks like in Groveland it will probably be found to be a minor site plan, which is a staff approval, not a board hearing. But basically, we had a very good meeting last Thursday. We had representatives from both towns in those two areas, as well as inspectional services, and everyone's working to ensure it's optimal coordination to reduce and try to avoid any redundancy and overlap. So, for instance, Concom and Planning Board, these aren't verified. They'll be talking with their respective boards and commissions later in July in both towns, but the idea is to try to have joint public hearings so that the public as well isn't having to keep their eye on two meetings. They can go to one place, get the definitive information. It allows the project team to put their resources into as much as possible, a consolidated track. So I think that's off to a good start. There is, I know this board has talked about the interest in proactively reaching out to the neighbors before the construction starts, and so that's very much on the, that's part of the intent of the project, and obviously Brad Dorr is here representing the project, and so I think everyone's in agreement. It really is going to be the school committee that's going to be kind of the primary conduit for communication, since it is their project. But that's a summary on just where we are with that. And so the next step is going to be Brad's team's going to provide a rough outline of timing and when they hope to be at certain thresholds on permitting, so that the towns can make sure that we're coordinating properly to help meet those timelines. So that's before we get to the other issue of the inspection fees. So, anything on that before we move on to the inspection fees?
No.
Okay. So as you pointed out, so the draft MOU before you is something that you did get a look at a couple of meetings earlier this year, I think right around 1st of January. And but it never got over the finish line. So basically, the signatories, it's the town and the school that need to just get, clear on how the costs will be paid. And it seems like there's broad agreement, if I'm hearing people correctly, that there's an intent for the project to pay for any direct expenses that the town incurs, so any third-party reviews or overtime or additional hours above budget for our inspectional services department. But we'd like to get an agreement kind of in place so that the project is ensured that they're properly budgeting for that, and that Glenn Clossy can waive the fees, because obviously it's not his authority to do that. That would be the Board of Selectmen. So.
Angus, the memo from Glenn, these figures quoted, are they like assumed to be like stuff that the West Newbury inspections would not be, they would be done by outside additional consultants? Is that what that $33,000 is, or is that the assumed budgeting of a inspections for a building of this square footage?
Now, this is actually this is an estimate based on a detailed review of the plan set, so not the inspections at all. It's just the plan set, which is, I don't know how many pages, but it's, the draft you had last week was,
it's a lot. Right?
It's a lot.
And I was in that change a lot. And so I think this is right. I mean, the intent here.
Oh, do you mind speaking to the microphone? Thanks.
So I think Angus is right. The intent is really to have the town be in a cost neutral position, right? So, and for that, right, they would be waiving what would otherwise be a substantial, building permit fee. But it's in the interest of the project. Ultimately, it's in the interest of the taxpayers, because in some regards, it's coming out of one pocket, right, going into the other. And then it's also, I think, from a goodwill perspective for other towns that may not be, involved in the site itself and have access to permit fees. Merrimack, right? It's kind of keeping everything on the up and up. So that was the intent. And I think the idea here is for time that Glenn, has to go and, spend in terms of reviewing drawings. And right, this is a big project, so it's not just something that we would say, that's everyday occurrence for Glenn. I think it's reasonable to go and put together some type of, hourly rate, and whatever he ends up spending on that time, I think that's a cost that the project, should bear, and we have done some budgeting for that. Beyond that, I think that there's an expectation of there's going to have to be, lots of different types of inspections, and, whether or not that's something that is staffed up with the existing inspectors that he currently has, and there's additional hours that would be incurred as a result of that, that too would be a project cost, right? And so all of that, would be something that would be, invoiced to the project and then ultimately, paid by the project. So again, it's just trying to keep, everybody on a cost neutral basis.
Yeah.
Okay.
From your experience in the past, Brad, have you, there are going to be some services or some inspections that our inspection department may not have the specific competencies for those areas. I'm supposing that's the case. Maybe I'm wrong.
Everybody's going to, that's doing them now is going to
Yeah.
be certified.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
going to leave that up to Glenn in terms
Yeah,
of, whether
okay.
or not they're comfortable with it. But if it was something that did need to be outsourced, that's, again, it would be.
Is that common? I mean,
The same type of thing. Well, it depends on the town.
Yeah.
This is, a big project in a smaller town. So
Right.
sometimes that happens. But for the most part, I think, towns handle a lot of that themselves.
Yeah.
They might have to kind of ramp up, when they have people that are part-time inspectors.
Yeah.
The key from the project's perspective is that, once we start to get going on that, and we'll be working to have a more detailed schedule, that, we're able to to get everybody on board. Here's what the expectation is, so that, you know, those things can be somewhat timely, because timely's key.
Right.
Yeah.
Time is dollars.
Well, it's just sequencing of work.
Right,
You know,
right.
everybody's like, okay, we're going to do a rough in, and, you know, we get there, and within a certain period of time, they want to be able to get that or do what they need to do in order to get that, and then they want to be able to close it up and move on with the sequence of work that has to happen after that.
So, Rick, to your point, I think it's a combination of both. I don't want to repeat what Brad said, but for things like HVAC, I understand with a building like this, there's a lot of high-tech things that are not what our staff are used to seeing, so they want to make sure they've got that third-party support, you know, for those things that aren't right in their wheelhouse. But then something like accessibility, you know, Glenn Kloss is our ADA coordinator. He's been doing that a long time, but a building of 212,000 square feet, there's just lots and lots and lots of compliance check, and at the end of the day, he's got to know that that's 100% ADA compliant and AAB compliant to sign off on. Now, one of the interesting things about this project, which I would describe as still kind of in play, or where we're kind of on a learning curve, is what is the school building authority looking at? Because we don't want to be redundant, but, you know, for the building inspector to issue the permit, he's putting his name that it complies, and if at the end of the day it doesn't, the town owns that, he's trying to, you know, make sure that doesn't happen. So I think both on the building, Glenn has been corresponding with Brad to help to make sure he's taking into account what the state is requiring as part of the significant amount of money they're putting into the project. And then similar, I met with the town planner this morning, and she's working on some of the things that the planning board would normally look at in peer review at the site plan process. I've told her I don't think we're going to need to look at here, because, for instance, on stormwater, I know that's going to be subject to DEP review. I mean, that it could be part of their review, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So I think there's a lot of detail work that I think Thursday's meeting was a good, you know, it kind of moved the ball forward, but I think there's still some of that ahead. And some of those questions or discussions are going to be, I think, between the project's engineering firm, Judith Nitch Engineering, and the, you know, planning boards and their peer reviewers, to help make sure that what they're looking at is what they feel they really need to look at, and not duplicating others' effort.
Okay.
And then on conservation, Wendy Reed, who's here tonight, was present at the meeting on Thursday, and it doesn't sound like, and this will be subject, I think, to the commission's approval as well, but it doesn't sound like there's going to be a need for outside costs to be incurred on the conservation side. It doesn't sound like. They'll be delineating the wetlands for the entire site and the resource areas, and then Concom's for both communities will walk the site. But it doesn't look like they're anticipating bringing in a third party for that. So we're basically trying to drill down on what are the anticipated out-of-pocket costs.
Okay.
And I just add, you know, this is a controlled construction job. So while Glenn and his team, they're going to have to go through and sign off on inspections, right? Our firm and all of the engineers within the respective disciplines are also going to have to sign off and sign affidavits to the effect that, you know, that the building is constructed in compliance.
Yeah.
So, you know, there is a lot of, you know,
Cross-checking.
belt and suspenders,
Yeah,
you know.
Does the school building authority also have a sort of a layer of engineering oversight, or no?
Well, not from a strict code compliance perspective. They do have a commissioning agent, which they will be paying for as part of this process. So, you know, that's another set of eyes that will be going on over the job, just in terms of, you know, kind of how the mechanical systems are put together, as well as, you know, how in particular the envelope construction is put together. But they're not, they actually are not, they don't have jurisdiction in terms of that particular avenue. That's actually passed down. So the AHJ in this particular circumstance is going to be local building inspector, and then as well as, you know, working with the fire department and the police department for those types of things.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Angus, so what should be our
Well, what-
timeframe on this? Are we looking to really get this done ASAP or?
I think we'd like to get to an agreement ASAP. One thing I did want to clarify from Brad, one of your earlier comments, you talked about that costs would be invoiced to the project, but, what we've envisioned, talked about is more an escrow account where the funds would be deposited with the town. The town would then pay those costs directly, and then get the escrow account reimbursed from time to time as the funds are drawn down.
So that mechanic of how you guys do that with the district is, up between the town and the district. I'm just saying that there has to be some type of invoice that's put together that documents the expenses, right, that are ultimately going to be withdrawn if you set up because we have to go and put that through the machine so that it's eligible for reimbursement.
Yep.
So, the district's gonna be pretty good about paying stuff. I don't know, if it's a cash flow thing for the town or what that requirement, why that's there.
Well, it's
but-
just, that's how every peer review, it's a 53G account. And it's really because those inspectors are working for the town. They're paying with the, projects, they're paying the invoices with the project's money, but it's partly so there's clarity that those outside inspectors are contracted with the town, so they're submitting their invoices to the town, and the town's paying them, with notice to the developer. And I've seen it structured in different ways. Sometimes it can provide for sign off by the project on the invoices, but one way or the other, that's how every project I've ever worked on has ever been funded,
So
not by the
Angus,
applicant.
did Glenn mention his, was not responsiveness, but agreeability he has who will be creating these invoices? I guess that's the thing.
The vendors, and then my office, the finance
That
office
be
would submit
no, but that
those
would be for
to,
the third party, but
Right.
what if Glenn has to work 50 hours some week, so
well,
how are we gonna create those invoices?
that would be, I think we would want to set up on the timesheets for the employees that once they're above the number of hours that they're budgeted, that would be recorded separately, so that we have a discrete record of what was over and above what the taxpayer is paying as part of the operating
Kind
budget.
of like a police detail kind of situation.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
But one thing, we've talked about, it's not final yet, but we've talked about Glenn. My thing on that is it's probably more the other inspectors, the electrical and plumbing, whose hours may go over because they're hourly. And Glenn, historically has been hourly. I'm proposing to make him exempt salaried, so there wouldn't be a incremental cost because he'd be salaried at that point. But for the part-time inspectors, where they're budgeted for a certain number of hours per week, there may be times that they're going above that.
Yeah, and that's, again, whatever time is spent on the project is, I think, that's a project cost.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm in a mode between what Glenn got from the International Code Council last week. That's what that acronym is, by the way.
Okay.
And what Leah's working on. I'm in kind of a fact-finding mode of, although we could, I think we could move quickly toward this MOU, because the amount, assuming we set it up the way I'm suggesting, is the escrow fund, and I should say, Mike drafted this, so I think he's suggesting as well. There would be an initial amount paid into that, and it provides that would be kind of re-upped as the account is drawn down. So it's not like we would need to know on day one the total amount that's likely to be incurred. But I think it's in everybody's interest to have a pretty good estimate of what that's likely to be over the 3-year life of construction.
Yeah, that's exactly.
I mean, the reason for the escrow account is because we don't have a separate appropriation for these costs. So technically, we can't incur the cost without knowing that the money source already there.
Okay.
Either an appropriation or the escrow.
So I'd have a little bit of trouble voting this without having a.
Oh, I'm not asking you to vote
number
it
on
tonight.
this, yeah. Would we anticipate any substantial increase in, material costs or, printing costs or anything like that?
Not that I've envisioned.
Okay.
So the agreement was initially tiered as kind of one piece of money as an offset to the town's overhead and another piece for direct expenses. It sounds like it's, moving more toward just direct expenses. So in terms of like printing costs and things, right now, that's not something we itemize. That's part of the town's overhead to run.
But what
department.
what ended up being really substantial, I think that should be.
I think, Dave, if there was a bunch of drawings or something that needed to be put together, Glenn just needs to ask us, right? And then we'll put it together and deliver. Because we have a separate printing budget. So I wouldn't expect that to be, a cost
I wasn't
again.
talking about stuff like this. I was talking about. thinking
Yeah,
about
because
printing of drawings, yeah.
That's expensive. So
Yeah.
if that's something, and we talked a little bit about that the other day, who's going to need what, and what size sets do you want to have to go and start the review process. So I think the printing costs of all of that, we would just get the order, if you will, and then we'll deliver. So
Okay.
I wouldn't expect that to be
because the printing capacity here, I think, there's large document printing capacity in the inspection office, but my guess is it's not going to have
No.
it's not going to, it wouldn't last through the project, probably.
You're probably right
Yeah,
about
right.
that.
Okay.
And then, I'm here to kind of help assist here, but I'm not representing the district in
Yeah.
terms of the
Yeah.
MOU. You
Yeah.
guys will have to
Yeah.
work out your own deal
Yeah.
on that.
Do you have a sense of when you'll be submitting for the site plan or conservation?
No, I was actually talking a little bit about that. We have a couple of things that we need to have crystallize, a couple of key decisions with the district. And then once we have those, then, that we can start to set the basis. We're pretty close on that. So I responded to Leah earlier today on that. Our intent is to, within the next week or so, be able to give all of the, relevant boards and committees an outline of what we hope to, be an anticipated permitting process for their review, see how that all works with them. And then, we'll have to fall in line with, what their schedules are as well. But at least that would be the start.
Yeah.
And then construction, there was also, I think Leah had in her email, this was from planning, kind of, do we have a sense of what the construction schedule is? And big picture there, we have a better handle on what that is, but the kind of the more detailed stuff associated with permitting, we don't. But it hopefully we'll start getting our ducks in a row pretty soon, so that we can start to be able to put those packages together for the various boards and committees.
And for the other boards and committees, how were the permitting fees going to be handled? Say for the planning board where, there are permitting fees for any development. How has that been discussed, or?
So I think that this is more to what Angus was alluding to. It's more in terms of a third-party reviewer,
Yeah.
right, that may have
Okay.
come in. We're
Okay.
pleased to hear the Conservation Commission's
Yeah.
position on that. But if there's something that, the planning board has to go out and do a third-party review of certain things, well,
Yeah.
that's part of the cost of the project.
Okay.
Again, we're trying to understand what each town wants to do so that we can start to get a handle on that. And to the extent that we can streamline the process, that's going to be better for everyone. But we recognize
Right.
that every town has, the things they have to do.
Right, yeah, well, I guess, acknowledging that it's sort of, going from one pocket to the other pocket sometimes, but, for instance, my impression at least is that the planning board from a, time utilization standpoint is pretty full.
Yeah.
And, so this will not be a trivial project, and I don't know how it impacts their ability to function and impacts, the hours that are available to the, of the planner. So, and again, I think the town's policy typically is for, public purposes, you don't charge fees. But how is the planning board?
So the planning
that.
board hasn't taken up that question.
Yeah,
I think last week's meeting was good at framing
Yeah,
the questions.
yeah.
I know that Leah's intent is to recommend that the board waive the permit fees,
Yep.
as Brad stated. Just as we're talking about here, the any direct costs the board may incur would be. We would look to the project to pay those, but that's really the planning board thing, and it's the planning board's jurisdiction as to whether to waive those fees or not. Likewise, I know Wendy represented, she thought the Concom probably would waive the fees, but she can't, that's gonna be up to the Concom.
Concom cannot waive the state fees, we can waive the local fees.
Okay. So basically, they've each got their own jurisdictions, but I think, we're off to a good start in
Yeah.
terms of making sure everyone's communicating
I
well.
guess everybody will find out how much bandwidth they have.
Yeah, we don't want the wheels of government to stop because of the projects.
Yeah.
If there's an expense, that, and we have to pay it as part of the project cost, we're willing to do that so long as everybody's being reasonable, and that's been
Right.
the case.
Great.
And one thing on the inspectional services is, as certainly Archie will know, and if Glenn was here, with the recent budget process, Glenn Clossy got a pat on the back, certainly from FinCom as well as from the Selectmen, because he's done a really good job over the years at continuing to annually update his fee schedule. And basically, that department is self-supporting financially. So while the expense budget is raising, is authorizing the full expenses for the department, on the other side of the ledger, they're bringing in more revenue annually. It's just about level, which under state law is exactly about how it should be. You should strive for that. Yeah. You shouldn't be profiting with your inspections, but likewise, the intent is to set fees that basically offset the cost to the taxpayer. So that's one thing we've talked about a bit, is with the amount of hours that will be diverted to a project that isn't generating fees. Part of my interest in my role as finance director is to make sure that the department as a whole is still has enough man hours to generate enough revenues that they're basically offsetting the expense budget, because we do budget revenues, and so every dollar that we expect to raise through other than property taxes reduces by $1 what we need to raise from the taxpayer.
And just again, right, because this is a controlled construction job, it's going to be, I think, the primary cost driver should be time associated with inspections. That's where the real money ultimately should be. And it shouldn't be something where we're completely sapping up the inspectional services time. I don't foresee that being the case. Whatever review Glenn needs to do, certainly, he has to do it, but most of the time, it's not overwhelming.
Right.
So I did meet with the superintendent on Thursday. And we talked this over, and I think that coming out of tonight's meeting, I think as Brad pointed out, it's really between the town and the school, and he's the named signatory. So I'll plan to meet with him again, and hopefully at the next meeting bring you something that's ready to be signed. So, okay. But that does rely on. I think that'll rely on Glenn Clossy and Brad's team continuing to kind of fine tune, what Glenn's needs are, and to the extent there's a difference of perspective there, I can bring that back to the board and tell you exactly, what the different points of view are.
Okay. Thanks, Brad.
Yep.
Let's move to the. I assume you want to talk about the new appointee of the Concom. Okay, let's skip to that item. Item J. So Wendy and Judy, do you want to come up, or? tell us about the new employee.
So I think you were aware that we had interviewed 2 candidates, and the first was extremely well qualified, and unfortunately was not willing to take the salary we were able to offer, or that was approved at town meeting. A second candidate who's just out of school and didn't have experience, but we feel like he could do a good job, and we've set up a mentoring program with MVPC. So that's why we were asking at the bottom of the class salary. Is it grade 6 or class 6?
So, tell me a little bit more about the background and just.
He majored in environmental.
So what kind of experience has this person had?
He majored in environmental science in college, so he has a degree and a lot of field experience. Since then, he's worked in construction. I think he worked for a sign company in Newburyport. Most recently, he's been working at a middle school as a paraprofessional. He coaches lacrosse and basketball at Triton. And he took an in-depth wetlands delineation course most recently when he decided he wanted to get into the conservation field.
It's a program that's certified by an organization of wetland scientists. So it's an intensive program. And he has also done a webinar that the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions offers on regulations. And for this week, he is working with Jay to learn about the projects that are ongoing in town and how the filing systems and other systems are set up.
So you feel pretty good about it?
Yeah, I think we set up a 90-day period during which he will be mentored, and we think that he will successfully complete that and be a good addition.
Great. I've read what we have and heard what was just, I think it sounds reasonable, and I think maybe good young blood is a good thing. Mm-hmm. With a, open mind and, yeah.
So do you want to get a motion?
Yeah, so I move that, well, where was, I gotta
It's,
find out.
I gotta find the papers.
Yeah, it's
I've got it here.
It's buried in here. Okay, great, I might remember it was
the lower number.
Okay, yeah, so I move that we approve the salary 25, 27, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, 20,
yes.
25, 27 per hour for 20 hours a week for conservation agent.
Second.
Beginning
And-
beginning July 1st for FY 2020.
And so, this is, he's getting paid on, the, wage line item that wasn't fully expended for this fiscal year at
Right,
the moment?
yes,
yeah,
or-
there was
Or
enough-
is he volunteering right now?
No, there was enough salary, enough money left in the salary line item to cover his, at the rate that we were
Great.
Okay.
requesting. Yeah.
Great. So do we need that included in the motion, or you already have that money budgeted? So
That's money already budgeted
right,
for
yeah,
this
yeah.
fiscal year.
Okay, great.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you second?
Yes, I did.
Great, all right, just want to make sure. Great,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, and, intermunicipal, that's a tough word to say, agreement with the town of Salisbury related to the harbor master services.
Okay, so you have in front of you both a clean version that is proposed for your review and approval. That is, as we speak, that is before the Salisbury Board of Selectmen. So it's been agreed at the, and recommended at the staff level, but it's going to both boards concurrently. And then you have also a redlined version showing the changes from the previous agreement. And you'll see that the primary change in substance, there's two primary changes. One is this agreement would broaden the scope of Salisbury services beyond pump-out services to include a presence on the weekends. Basically, weekends throughout the boating season. The harbor master, under this agreement, will be present in West Newbury waters as a visible presence, and to the extent needed would be available to do enforcement. Any tickets or referrals would be sent through this office, through our office, not through Salisbury. But that's on substance the main change, and then the dollars associated with that would be an increase in the annual cost from $6,000 to $8,000, with that being paid really from two different sources. One would be the pump out dollars, which the Harbor Committee had met earlier this year, I think it was in February, and agreed to make available some of the Waterways Fund, which is a standing account. And then the $2,000 was included in the expense budget. And part of the reason to divide up how it's paid is, as you know, under the pump out services, where we have a Clean Vessel Act grant, so we get 75% reimbursement. So it's important to track that money separately, because every invoice we pay, we send to the state, and we get 75 cents on the dollar returned to us. So I think it's an improvement in level of service, and while it's an overall increase in cost, it's a reduction to the operating cost. I understand, and I'm sure Brad will represent that contribution from the Harbor Fund isn't something that's sustainable year in, year out over time, but where there is a balance that had built up to in the 21,000 range that the committee felt comfortable recommending that expense for FY20.
Brad, I was wondering, just what's the time to, if they're coming from Salisbury, if they wanted to come up the river to West Newbury, how long, what's the travel time there?
So in a non-emergency situation, it's probably, 20 minutes or something like that. They can go as fast as they want if there's an emergency situation. But overall, I think the Harbor Committee thinks, that it's a reasonable proposition to go and have them there on the weekends. Also note that even though we also talked about rather than having to have Salisbury come and help on the West Newbury side, because we don't, two sides to the river, right? One is Amesbury and one is West Newbury, is that Amesbury at the time, I believe, didn't really want to participate, in that. But I can say this past weekend, they were active, out there.
Amesbury was, you said?
Amesbury was,
okay.
Yeah. So, we went from, nobody watching to now there's, a couple of people who will be watching out there, which I think on the weekends is a good thing, particularly with that sandbar that's out there. And, there's a lot of people that are out there. One thing that I guess I just would think that we should understand is, though, and I don't know the answer to this actually, Angus, is that the no wake zone that's currently out there, which starts from about where Davy Jones Marina is to, there's a couple of no wake signs that are out there, to the bottom of way to the River Road, if you're thinking about where the river goes. Okay. Is, what no wake zone actually is that? And I don't know. At one point, it used to be undesignated, and then at one point, it may have been West Newbury, but we should, because I see probably the biggest area where people are going to get stopped is, you're violating a no wake zone. And we should just make sure that we know whose
no wake zone is it really?
What is that?
Yeah,
no wake
whose
zone?
law are
Right,
we
there's signs
enforcing
out there, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right, but
Yeah.
to avoid any potential problem down the road in terms of enforcement of the no wake zone, whose no wake zone is? Because I don't know. Do we put those signs out? I don't think so.
I'm not aware that we do anything.
Yeah. So I don't know, so that's what, you know, if there's a no-wake zone that we're trying to enforce, we should make sure that it's actually a legitimate no-wake zone. We'll have to find out the answer to that.
That's interesting.
I know that, you know, Ray Pike, the Salisbury Harbor Master, has, I know he's very interested in meeting with the Harbor Committee whenever the next meeting is scheduled, so I'm sure that could help bring some clarity to that.
So like we did with the Newburyport Police when we were divvying up, you know, the road over by the reservoir, do we have to do anything formally to, in other words, so, how do we designate that the, or maybe this doesn't, that the Salisbury Harbor Master has jurisdiction in West Newbury's waters? Do we have to do anything formally to designate that, or?
Ray has told me that the Harbor Master jurisdiction applies, including in, you know, in the portion of the river in front of West Newbury, and that there's no special action that's needed.
There isn't, okay.
That's what he's told me.
Okay.
Mike, do you agree with that?
I haven't researched it.
Okay. Yep, I asked him that.
Well, so he's a law enforcement officer, right?
Yeah,
So,
he is.
so if you're a, you know, police in West Newbury, do you have jurisdiction in an adjoining community?
No, police is
No.
different.
Well, okay, so there isn't any correlation there, okay.
If you have an MOA,
Okay,
we have MOAs with,
Newburyport on,
yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I think the intent really is to show a presence.
Right.
Yeah, I think once, you know, the word gets out,
Right,
I think that the effect will be what we're
right, and
looking
if somebody, you hear a siren, you'll slow down.
for. And they were, like I said, they were active
Yeah.
this week, and not Salisbury,
Yeah.
but Amesbury.
Yeah,
one other thing I do want to point out on the money side, because I know this was a concern of the board last summer, was the prior agreement had been structured on the pump out services as 4 quarterly equal payments, and the board last August and September had expressed its that the board felt that the pay should be based on services rendered, so that is reflected in this language. So we'd be invoiced based on the pump out services, not a fixed fee. However, on the I'll call it the enforcement side, that is structured as a fixed fee because their presence is the service, whether they actually write a ticket or not, is as opposed to the pump out where it's if there's no need for it, we don't want to be paying for all this service.
So my other question was about visibility and contact and so forth. So how, suppose someone's, seen someone repeatedly driving through an anchorage, really, really fast or whatever. So how do they know to contact the Salisbury? How would someone even know to contact the Salisbury? How are we going to get the word out?
Well, that's a really good point. As you know, every spring, my office sends around letters for people to renew their mooring permits, and I had been talking to Annie, who helps me with that work, and I kept saying, I want to retool the letter to kind of tell about what we're doing, but we didn't have an executed agreement yet, and we didn't want to let too much time go by on the calendar. We just needed to kind of get the letters out. But I think that once this is executed, we have that mailing list. I think it'd be great to do a mailing and just say, hey, this is now a level of service that the town's providing, and if you see people, if you see a harbor master out there, this is what that means. I did take the liberty of updating the town website harbor master page, so that it does now have Ray Pike's number as the 24-hour and emergency contact. But that site probably doesn't get a whole lot of hits. So I think we need to proactively get that out so people know that.
And if someone I seemed to work okay last year. If someone needs a pump out, then
If they call the town, right, then the town knows that
Yeah.
it's Salisbury. And same like if it was somebody driving through a mooring field or something like
Yeah.
that. They would call the town and police department knows. by the time they've driven through it, they're long gone, but,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, want to make a motion?
Sure. Yeah, I'd make a motion that we approve the memorandum of understanding between the, or I guess it's called the intermunicipal agreement for administration of shared services between the town of West Newbury and the town of Salisbury for harbor master and pump out service.
Second. Further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks.
Okay, from boats to animals, okay. So another intermunicipal agreement for animal control services between the town and the city of Newburyport. We have been doing this for the past several years. It's been working very well. We have a new, the West Newbury is reutilizing one of their vehicles to, as part of the agreement, one of the contributions that the town of West Newbury makes is a vehicle.
See, Brad?
And so that's been redone and will be put into service. I don't know if we need to go further.
I don't think we do. So, I move that we approve the, I guess, well, we didn't talk about the indemnification issue. Do we need to address that at all?
That's a good question. Well, let's make a motion.
Okay, yeah. So I move that we approve the intermunicipal agreement for administration of shared animal control services between the town of West Newbury and the city of Newburyport.
Second, discussion. Well, let's discuss the indemnification. Mike, you want to talk about that for a second?
Just while he's heading up there. So this is also concurrently under review tonight with the City Council in Newburyport, but they did review it at their meeting 2 weeks ago, and their Budget and Finance Subcommittee had requested this change to the Article 10 indemnification, which was not part of the draft that this board had reviewed earlier in the spring during the budget process. So Mike has reviewed it. And
Right, and essentially what the change is that it kind of clarifies that when the animal control officer is acting in his duties in West Newbury, that he's almost considered an employee of West Newbury, so that if there's some claim or action against that particular individual while he is doing work in West Newbury for the town of West Newbury, then the town would be responsible for that. This is a concern, obviously, and I just, I wanted to be sure that if that were the case, that our insurance would cover him, and I mentioned that to Angus, who checked with our insurer, and came back, yes, that person, would be considered under our coverage, so, I mean, it is
Okay.
and a little bit of an additional risk for the town, but then again, he's acting on behalf of the town.
Right.
So.
Okay. Thanks.
Further discussion?
No more.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I did have one point I forgot to make on the Harbor Master one, which is a small point, but it's actually a win, and it ties in with a different issue that we looked at a couple of months ago. So part of what Salisbury has agreed to with the Harbor Master is to house the boat, which is great, because that frees up a bay in one of our storage out at
You mean
the,
in the winter?
in the winter.
Oh, okay.
That's right. So one of the issues you may remember a couple of months ago, it had come up at the Council on Aging, is the need to
The van.
get the van in a garage, and we literally didn't have a garage space. Now we do, because they've agreed to house the boat. So I just wanted to make you aware that was a little win that we got out of that deal.
That's good.
Committee appointments.
Okay.
Actually, Archie, if you wouldn't mind, can you give me 90 seconds? I have some handwritten notes on committee appointments I left on my desk.
Could I get a stand up? My knees.
How are they doing?
They don't like sitting for too long. They're headed in the right direction, but slowly. Yeah, that's what I hear. I'm not sure I believe that yet. Learning you have to be careful to not over.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
You biking yet?
Just in my basement. I don't go very fast or very far.
No, I don't think you go very far. That's...
So these are notes since we.
Yep, for everything that's got the shaded, yeah, we've, either Mike or I has been working to run these to ground.
They're all just a shade of gray here.
I'm trying to find the color.
Yeah, selection.
Here we go. So red we're gonna ignore, and we're gonna look at green.
The green are the
No, we've got comments on,
Oh, you have comments
yeah,
on the red?
yep,
Okay,
yep.
okay.
So the first one is Peg Dushman. She is interested in remaining on the board and had communicated that to Mike. It just didn't get back into my notes. So Mike has recommended that that appointment should be
There she is, okay.
through June 15, 2021, if you're so inclined.
Okay. I move that we appoint, did you say she goes by Peg as opposed to Margaret? Is that what I heard you say? Okay, by Peg Dushman, to a 3-year term,
Well, it's actually 2 years.
a 2-year term.
So that would be to 2021.
Right.
To 6/15/2021.
Yeah, okay. And that's income?
Register our voters.
Oh, register, right, yeah, sorry.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Just one point.
Okay.
Chief, Peg is on the board, and this would complete her term.
Yep.
You appointed Posey for the 3-year term.
Yep,
Our Elise Hendricks has decided to resign
okay,
her term, so we don't have a candidate yet. So I'd, ask to reach out to the town if somebody's interested in registrar voters.
okay,
We have the committee application request on the website, and certainly, get it in and get it to me or Angus so that we could talk about it. So, but she's done a lot of good service over the years and has suggested that she would be done, at the end of this fiscal year.
yeah, okay, great.
I got it.
So, again, I don't know what else you have for notes that we don't,
Basically, any shaded cell, we
Yeah.
will tell you our latest knowledge on.
Okay.
So the next one is the Harbor Committee. Brian Richard wants to be an alternate member.
He does, and at the board's June 10th meeting, you had voted to designate an alternate or associate. I used both terms. I didn't mean to. That was it's either. Here's the thing. The Harbor Committee regulations, which are part of the town bylaws, define a 3-member Harbor Committee. They don't provide for associates. That was talked about at the last meeting, and it was agreed that it's kind of within the board's broad appointment authority if you see fit to have an associate member. And I think it would be, more participation.
I don't see how it could be bad.
I totally agree. I just want to make the point that it's the committee composition is defined as 3. I did add it to my punch list as a potential future bylaw amendment if we see that as a continuing practice, that maybe we amend those regs to provide for a 5-member committee at some point in the future. But for now, it's a 3-member. And if Brian is to be appointed, that'd be 2.
At certain times, it's been hard actually to have enough people on that committee. So I think making it 5 might then make it. Then we're trying to, if we can have like somebody that might be an alternate and someone leaves, that's good. I think that might be better.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I move that we appoint Brian Richard as, are we referring to this as alternate or associate member?
You're the appointing authority, so that's...
So let's call it alternate member to the Harbor Committee. For a
Second.
term ending in 2019?
6/15/20.
Yeah, okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry to have to read your cliff notes, but.
Okay, so we have 3 people on the Historic District Commission, and we don't have, so do we have updates on whether they want to be back or not?
We do. Mike connected with Jack Eldon and Judy Adelson, and they both have requested reappointment, and I got an email come in from Jeff Cluley at 6:10 p.m. that he is also interested in reappointment, so.
Great.
So what would their term would be till?
There's a three-year term, so that would be
2022?
2, yeah.
2022, okay, so there you go.
Okay, so I move that we appoint Jeff Cluley, Jack Alden, and Judy Adolphson to the Historic District Commission for a term expiring June 30th, 2022.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have, do we have update on Dugan Sherwood for the CIC?
We do, but actually I want to pause before you get there. I met with Ryan Goodwin this afternoon on something related to Mill Pond and talking this over. He has made me aware that Robin Pendergast, you voted 2 weeks ago to designate her an associate member of Mill Pond. Apparently her interest is to be a full member of Mill Pond, which I think just got lost in the translation. So if you see fit, I would respectfully request that you re-vote her appointment, not as a 1-year associate, but as a 3-year voting member. So that's Robin Pendergast in the Mill Pond Committee. You'll see this at the bottom of page 3, the second from the bottom.
Okay, and so there are 7 voting members on that committee? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Oh, you know what? Oh, yeah, no, that's right, because Dina Trotta
Yeah,
didn't.
requested no reappointment, okay,
Right.
yep, okay. All right,
So
so,
are we making too many people or not?
no, that's right then.
No.
Because Polly, actually, no, Polly's a full member, so that is,
No, they would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, I think we're good because Dina's still on the list because it's just the way this is formatted. It carries people forward up. But she's no longer on by her own request. So that would leave us, by my count anyway, with 7, including Robin as a full member.
right,
with
okay,
Paul
and
as
then
associate.
one associate, right, okay, all right. So I would move that we appoint Robin Pendergast as a full Mill Pond Committee member for a term expiring, is that a 3-year?
6/15/22.
22.
Okay, 6/15/2022.
Second.
Why is that date 6/15 as opposed to 6?
That's
full
a question of mine.
fiscal year.
I personally would love to see it
Right.
go to 6/30, but that's, I
Right.
guess, how it's always been
Why is
done,
that,
so.
yeah, why is that not to the end of the fiscal year?
At some point in the past, with selectmen who are no longer selectmen, I think decided,
I might blame that on Mr. Anderson.
yes, had recommended that that should be the one date, because we had different dates, some on the 30th, and he advocated and was accepted by the rest of the members to try to have all the committees end like 6:15.
Okay,
That was simply a practice of the board, an unofficial practice. There's no bylaw or policy even to have it. It's just what they decided to do about 2 years ago.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember why we did.
But it was an
He had a
initiative,
he had a
an
reason.
initiative, and he was doing yeoman's work and keeping the list, so
okay,
the other two selectmen said, okay, you've undertaken this work.
okay. Well, I'm not going to attempt to undo something
you
that.
can undo it if you wish.
Well, but until I have a reason, I
For
guess.
this
I will.
year, that's, yeah, we'll stick with that. but-
So, yeah,
Okay.
so in any event,
Well, I think also it gives a little bit of leeway if a committee needs to work on July 2nd, then we've got somebody ready to, we're more likely to be ready to go. If there was vacancies that occurred at July 1st automatically because people left or they weren't reappointed, then I think it was to bridge the gap a little bit, doesn't it? I don't know.
So I see a motion and a second.
Who seconded?
Yep.
All in
oh,
favor?
aye.
Okay, and Ryan did confirm he was unanimously reconfirmed as chairman going forward, and that Deb Hamilton will be the secretary for FY20.
Okay, so
Okay, so now we're going to the Capital Improvements Committee.
And Dugan Sherwood is not available due to time constraints with his work.
okay.
Okay. So that would be a opening for an at-large member of that committee. So contact the contact the town to perhaps apply for that committee. It's not a huge amount of work, just for a few meetings a year, but a good learning experience and a good contribution to the town.
Did you hear from, I see that Rose Viteri had, as of last meeting, hadn't requested to be reappointed, so,
And
to the Cultural Council, excuse me?
She declined.
Okay.
So we're okay with that. We have a minimum, we have more than the minimum number.
And then with Allison Tedeschi, toward the top, page 5, I had heard, I have not heard from her. I heard from Heather Karp that that Allison intended to put in. I followed up with an email to Heather over the weekend and a voicemail today. I haven't connected, so that may be, I would recommend you table that, and once I actually hear from Allison to confirm her interest, then I can bring it back to you at the next meeting for
Okay.
an appointment.
And then on the Energy Advisory Committee, I think that was the next set of openings.
that's next.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got, by my notes from Mike's work, we've got Liz Callahan is definitely interested in reappointment. Dugan Sherwood is not, for the same reasons, his work schedule. We didn't hear from Phillips. I did send him an email this morning to say one way or the other, and unless he emailed me in the last 10 minutes, I haven't heard. So I would suggest maybe tabling that.
Okay. Well,
Do you know Rick?
I haven't spoken with Phillips, no, so I don't know. I mean, I know him, but I haven't spoken with him about this. But I can try to reach out after tonight. But you said I spoke with Liz. She told me she did.
Yes.
And
Yep,
you
that
got
was-
something from her in writing. So okay, great.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess I'd
Just Liz, I guess.
yeah, just Liz. So move that we appoint Liz Callahan to the Energy Advisory Committee, and that's currently just an annual term till
Second.
2020.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that brings us to the Car Post Building Committee, and this jumps around a bit because this topic's later on the agenda, but you know from the materials in the packet that we don't have a draft charge to present, but I have recommended that you do go ahead and reappoint the 3 current members, just so that there continues to be a committee, constituted, and then I think it's going to be probably by the, mid-July meeting, I expect we'll have a draft. It's the ball's kind of in my court to get something to the, not just the committee, but there's a group of interested citizens that have met a couple of times. I know, Rick, you were at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and another meeting this past Thursday, so I'd like to have something to you that's kind of been, chewed on by others, and I just haven't had the time to draft it. I did send a template for a committee charge to Ann O'Sullivan and Marley Switzer and Jane Wild late last week, because it struck me that they were kind of inclined toward this sort of thing, and so Ann thanked me and said that's a great template, because now if they can get to it before I can get to it, the point is we're looking to have a charge so it's clear, but in the meantime they've been operating for a number of years without a charge, so there's certainly no harm there. So I would recommend you make the appointments and then understand that an updated charge may be forthcoming.
Great, good. So I would move then that we appoint Bob Janes, Marlene Switzer, and Richard Atwater to the Car Post Building Committee. And was this a one-year term?
Yes.
Through 6/15/2020.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's it.
Okay. Anybody else? Angus, that's it?
Nope, that's all I've got.
Okay.
You had something in there just informational about the planning board appointment. Obviously, that's not under your, it's elected, but just so that you have the information.
Yep.
We are going to table the employee wage schedule for the moment.
And the board will have a special meeting toward the end of the week, looks like probably Thursday night, to do that.
Just so we get it done within the fiscal year.
Yes.
Right.
The next item is to request for the Council on Aging to apply for a Pennies for Poverty grant.
This is something that they've applied for in the past and is helpful to the food pantry and the gift baskets at the holidays. And I guess in the past they haven't asked for approval, but as you know, the board policy is that grants get approved, so I suggested that Teresa put it in here. I told her I didn't think she needed to be here tonight to represent the request.
I see no reason for us to not approve this.
Right. So I'd move that we approve the request to, or the authorization, request for authorization to seek Pennies for poverty grant.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
The next item is a review of a potential special town meeting, warrant article to fund updated pictometry by Merrimack Valley Planning. We've done this in the past, but they want to have so that they can plan to know that there will be contributions from the municipalities. They're asking us to guarantee our participation, but it's hard for us to guarantee that without it being appropriated, but we can sort of make an effort to do so.
Right, so whether it ends up being a warrant article or a line item transfer or something that's simply put into the operating budget for FY21, well, I say simply, that's not simple either. So I just, I didn't want to sign something without floating the trial balloon and make sure that there's support from the board to do this. I think it's very valuable work. I know it's extremely valuable to assessing. I think it's also valuable to conservation. I use the online GIS all the time. It's having good current aerial imagery, I think is well worth the money, but I just didn't want to put my name to it without.
Yeah, so the background information that came in the packet said that it was used by various departments of the town, and if you go to the assessor's website, it's, I don't remember if it's on My Map or which of the mapping applications on their website, there's an opportunity to select pictometry, to view pictometry, but at least on my computer it doesn't come up. And I'm curious, is that something that's in the public domain, available in the public domain to, could be my computer. Maybe it doesn't like a map.
It's supposed to be, Rick.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
I won't take it personally.
Is that on your town laptop or work from home?
I haven't tried it on the town laptop. I've
Okay.
tried it on my home.
Okay, yeah, we definitely can get you up and running on that.
Yeah, no, I'll look at it on the town laptop. I haven't done that yet, but
It should work, but even if it's your personal browser, it should work.
Right.
So maybe, send me, no, actually, better yet, cut me out of the middle, send it to Meredith. She'll make sure you get squared away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got enough on your plate.
So I would make a motion that we, this is all we can really do, is that we plan on making a special town meeting article for the fall town meeting to appropriate money to cover the estimated cost of $7,186 that can be paid over the next 2 fiscal years.
And I'll second that.
I would offer perhaps broaden the motion just so that we don't have to revote it in the event we decide, or the board decides that you'd rather, put it into the FY21 operating budget, just because you specified the town meeting article, and that may, as we get to Labor Day.
It is kind of it's not an annual expense.
Right.
It's
Every few years,
is it
Every 3
or
years.
4 or something like that?
Typically,
yeah.
I think it's every 3 years. So, but something just adding to the end of your motion, or otherwise, support a town meeting article, or otherwise support appropriation for this expense.
Okay, I would accept that amendment.
Then, I'll second your acceptance, I guess.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
The next item is update on projects that the town and Angus in particular is working on to get done before the end of the fiscal year. Are there any particular ones that you think we should discuss tonight, Angus, or not?
No, only to note that I've just crossed off 4 of them based on actions you've taken tonight, so. Finalize and execute DPW union contract, the committee staff committee reappointments, we still gotta do staff.
The one
And the
that
2 MOAs.
Okay,
so.
the one that I wanted to talk to, and Bob is here right now, is what's happening with the landfill, and it's like, what, is there anything further that the town needs to monitoring, that the town's up to date on what they're supposed to be doing? I would
We're
think
right
so.
in the thick of it. So the Board of Health successfully petitioned the FinCom and this board actually for a line item transfer of FY19 monies that were on track to be underspent in a different line to support some additional testing that DEP is requiring. And so Bob met briefly with myself and Lori on Friday to talk about making sure that those funds can be encumbered, so that, because some of the work's not going to get wrapped up quite by June 30th. So I'm not into the details. Bob will know more about that, but on the money side, there's some funds.
Yeah, kind of what's going on, we have a plan drawn up by an engineer for installing, I forget how many feet of vent pipe on Middle Street that borders on the dump side, or the old dump side of the street.
Okay.
But the plan calls for going down about 15 feet, somewhere between 15 to, 12 to 15 feet deep, wrapping stuff in fabric and all that kind of stuff, but water's at about 3 feet. So I was talking with Paul the other day, and I don't think that's going to do the intended purpose, which was supposed to be collecting the gases and vent it off.
Right.
So I think we need to go back and talk to the engineer about where we think is a better place to set that. So, but we're still obviously in contact with DEP and the engineers about trying to work out some of the stuff. But we did encumber, or we will be encumbering any of the funds to get us through the.
Why? I was just curious. Why did we find this now versus, is the gas that is like a new event, or it's been there and no one looked for it?
I think it's been there and no one's looked for it until DEP, when they closed the dump years ago, back in the 86, I think, when they closed it, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the town was supposed to monitor all that stuff, and for whatever reasons, it was never done. And it fell on the current board a few years ago to start monitoring it and figure out where it is. And, we're required by DEP to see where the gases are going. And some of them are going further across the street. So we need to monitor that, and that's where this is where this is coming from. And so we're working with DEP and engineers to, try to stop it before it gets across the street and gets into houses and all this other kind of stuff. We can vent it out.
Right.
But like I said, the plan we saw, they require it to be down 15 feet, but water level's at like 3 feet. So
So it's right along on the, I guess that would be on that can be the west side or the south side? Of,
probably
Middle
the
Street?
south side or southeast side of the street.
Of Middle
yeah.
Street,
Yeah.
on the dump side
On
of
the
Middle
dump
Street.
side.
And the water at that level is,
That's what Paul said, that the
Wow,
water
so-
level's about 3 feet.
because that isn't that far below the top of the
Yeah, I know. I know.
the top surface of the dump,
Yeah.
of the landfill. So,
But so far, I mean, everything seems to be fine. It's just
Yeah.
gases that is the issue, so.
right.
So,
Okay.
So-
It is fair to say, at least based on what I've heard and conversations I've had with Paul and the board, we do see this as something where costs are likely to continue to go up, and there may well be a proposal at the fall town meeting for additional funding based on what comes of the testing and whatever else DEP may
It is
require.
what it is. We can't.
Right.
no, and
We
I
have
think
to do it. Yeah.
we're gonna, I mean, the town highway department can't do that type of work. So, you know, you're talking trench boxes and all kinds of stuff, and that needs to be done by somebody with bigger equipment.
Right.
And, you know, that's something we can't do. So there's going to be an expense for that, I'm sure. And not cheap, I wouldn't think.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay.
That was fortuitous, because that was the one I had circled.
So I think,
Any that you want to talk about?
yeah, well, I was just going to say, I think, Angus, you were talking about maybe taking this up, this list up on the July 22nd meeting?
Yeah, I would
for
love to,
proposing.
you know,
Yeah.
and Archie and I have talked about it a bit, and I think we're focused on, you know, closing out the current fiscal year,
Yep.
and obviously the bicentennial events the second week of July are a, you know, huge focus, but I think I'd love to work with Archie and with the board to come up with what's a great format for kind of goal setting for the year. One thing that's a little bit different, obviously, I started when that had already, you were guys were kind of in the thick of that for the current year, maybe had already done some of it. But one thing I observed from last year is, you know, I got here, the board and I had already met before I officially started work, and the board had kind of set some 90-day and 6-month goals for my office, and there was some clarity on some of the bigger picture goals. But then I remember early in my time that the direction was from my office, you know, as directed by the board, out to the departments to invite everyone to send us your goals. And so while I was trying to get my head around and move forward on the goals I'd been given, all of a sudden I start getting goals from 14 different directions. And just the process of trying to make sense of all of that was really very inefficient from my standpoint. So I would, you know, at this point, I think I've got a pretty good finger on the pulse of what the different groups are doing. And I think it'd be great to circulate, not this per se, but something to kind of prime the pump and say, these are some of what we have, you know, the board has on our work plan, on our radar, whatever. Are we missing anything? And kind of invite that up front, and then have the board, when we meet to set goals for the year, have that already take into account what we've heard from different departments and boards, committees, and commissions. So it's not this, I mean, it kind of felt like we were chasing our own tail a bit. So I think that if we retool that a bit, and I'd like to work with, you know, with Archie and the board to kind of crystallize that, I think it'd be more efficient.
Also, too, it might be financial in nature. If there's something that's a big project that's on the department is envisioning that would come to the annual town meeting, us finding out about it now is way better.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I was alluding to, and just wanting to somewhat, you know, retool a bit, at least what I observed of what happened last year. Again, I set foot here July 2nd, so, you know, I don't have all the context, but it felt a bit to me like it was a distraction from moving forward. We were getting goals coming in as late as like, you know, August, and then at one point, I think Joe said at a meeting in August, you know, why doesn't each board member tell Angus what your top goals are? And then I got 3 new sets of goals for me. It was like, okay, guys, because I got to do work here. I can't just talk about goals all the time. So I'd like to, what we did in Hamden, we did it as part of the budgeting process, and it was really, really good, was we would get together on a Saturday. The morning was kind of the presentation time where the department heads were invited to present to the elected council and manager what their kind of goals or work plan was. And then in the afternoon, we would kind of chew on all of that and put together the council's goals, taking into account what we'd heard. And there was a lot of prep, a lot of materials provided ahead of time. So it wasn't just a, you know, schedule a meeting and have it. There was a process, but I think it was really efficient, more so than what I observed here.
Okay, we're on our last, husband. Jen, you wanted to put a sign out?
Yeah, is that all right? Just a sandwich sign.
It's pretty controversial. I don't know. So-
Glenn's not here, so
Okay,
this is
wait.
your chance, no.
Yeah, it's for the exhibit, which is open from noon to 6, July 6th through the 10th.
So that's, although it's for the, Pentucket Arts Foundation, it's really part of the 200th
It is
200th anniversary celebration
Yeah, it's a,
on town property.
it's our collaboration with the Historical Society and the Pentucket High School Arts Department. All of us all together are having that exhibit. And as part of that exhibit, the foundation is showing that film, Voices of West Newbury. And we're having that reception that evening of the July 8th. But the exhibit runs from the 6th through the 11th. And July 8th happens to be History and Heritage Day, and the Bicentennial Committee kind of just handed that over to us and said, you guys do something on that day then. So we're taking over that for them, I guess.
Jen, will someone be there during those days all the time?
We
or
have, we have
Somebody
two
scheduled?
time periods each day for someone to be
Okay.
there. And Jane actually has said she's going to be there probably the whole time because she's very concerned. They have artifacts and stuff there that they don't want to, we're not going to just leave the building open.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to say also for the reception, if people, anyone who's coming to the reception, and everybody's welcome, if they could just RSVP by July 1st, because we're catering some refreshments, and that would be helpful for us to
Okay.
get a comp, okay?
Great.
Anything else? Just a
No.
regular sandwich board is all we're looking for to go out front of town hall. You know,
Yeah,
anything
I
from
mean,
the
I
book?
have no objection. I'm just wondering, because there's a sign bylaw, I know, which I should be able to rattle off at the top of my head, but do we need to, relative to the sign bylaw, is there anything we need to do?
It's,
I know for
signs on
agricultural
public
reasons-
property are the selectmen's vote.
Okay.
And those are carved out of the sign bylaw,
Okay.
in a nutshell. Yeah, informational signs
Okay,
of a
well,
public agency.
All right, so in that case, I'd, move that we approve to the Pentucket Arts Foundation sign to be put out in front of the Old Town Hall for the dates of July 6th through the 11th.
Second.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All in favor?
aye. Thanks, Jen.
Okay, do you have something, updates on the water tank, Angus?
There was so much information that I put together a very brief memo just because I felt to try to capture all of it, you would have a little treatise in it. So I think it's off to a great start. We had a really good meeting on Wednesday, pre-construction meeting. A couple of members of the Water Commission, obviously Mike Goutet was there, Mike McCarron, myself, DPW and police were both there for part of it. The selected contractors, some of their subcontractors. So it was great to have everyone in one place. We talked through a lot of the issues. We have, they sketched out kind of in broad strokes where they hope to be when in terms of on the calendar. The first step, and I don't have my notes in front of me, so actually I do. But I think that the first step, they'll be pouring the concrete foundation, and I think that's going to start, I want to say in around August.
First thing is widening the roadway.
The access path, yep.
Actually, the first thing is that, and this is with the
Oh, I
agreement
found my
with,
notes.
the agreement with Chip Hall to install the pipe, and that's supposed to start on July 9th. That's where they've agreed to, install that water line to connect to Hilltop Circle.
Right.
And that's a separate contractor from what we're doing, okay? And then Angus will have his notes, and then after that, the first thing is they're gonna be doing widening the roadway and, preparing it for the traffic, obviously that has to go over there.
Yeah, they were looking to begin building the tank around early October. They expect the steel construction to extend 6 to 8 weeks. So the hope is to get that done this construction season or by the end of the calendar year, but obviously that'll be weather dependent. And then painting next spring. So the Tata and Howard, the town's or the Water Commission's consultant, will be preparing an updated, more detailed schedule. But in broad strokes, that's where we are. The construction hours will be 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Would require approval from the commission in order to do any work on weekends or holidays. There's limitations on trucks can't access Hilltop Circle or that whole neighborhood before 7 a.m., so you won't have them going out early and idling.
So where are they gonna, if they show up at 6, where are they gonna hang out?
Down on
On 114, they're basically staging area is gonna be across
Yeah.
from the, basically the well site on 114. The idea is you wait there.
On 113,
113, excuse me.
because they're not going to be down in Danvers.
They're not gonna be down there, excuse me, I'm sorry. But, that has a very wide margin.
Yeah.
And and obviously it's not near any houses, so that it won't be disturbing anyone. The idea is that they're instructed to stay there, then they'll get a phone call, come on up. And that way, there will never be more, I think, than what, two trucks at the site at any one time? That was the plan. But although they really didn't feel that they were going to be needing that much, because there's not a lot of big build. The only time that they're gonna have, construction trucks would be when they're pouring the base and they have the concrete trucks. So, and again, you don't want them waiting in Hilltop Circle.
Right.
No.
Right.
No. So that's what we've, talked to them about, and then the nice thing was we're talking right to the subcontractor who's gonna be doing it.
Yeah, good.
And pointing out to them, this is where you're gonna be, and just have a cell phone, and when you're ready, it's probably like a 5-mile trip, but you'll be here in, 7 to 8 minutes.
Right,
So-
right.
So Bob may have other observations in terms of how the water department, kind of what their critical path is, but one of the things that I'm focused on with them is getting the neighbor letter out to that whole neighborhood. Last fall, we put together mailing labels, so we've been teed up to send a letter for a while, but the information kept changing with the need to rebid and get more appropriation, and now there's some additional nuance with, especially with the work of the private contractor as part of the Drake's Landing condition of permit, and then the public contractor doing the work. So we're actively retooling the neighborhood letter.
Just in case we get any questions, so where will the Drake's work be done? Where will they be?
They're putting it in where we have the access road to the, to where the water tank is gonna be.
Okay, so, but are they gonna have to be accessing the pipe under Hilltop Circle, or is it gonna be affecting is the road gonna be dug up there at all, or not? No, okay.
And there is a pre-construction meeting with that contractor tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
So part of why we want to make sure we're clear on all that before we send out the neighborhood letter is when people see that contractor, they will obviously think that's the town's contractor. So we want to make sure we're crystal clear on when they're working, make sure they're crystal clear on what the town's limitations are and hours and those kinds of things, so that when we send a letter out to the whole neighborhood, it'll say that you'll see, you see a contractor out there around July 9th, and they're doing this, and then the town's piece is that, and to try to make it as clear as we can, which I'm not doing a good job on tonight.
There's an existing stub that goes between number 19 and number 21 Hilltop Circle.
Okay.
That's where our access road is. I'm not sure exactly how far up there it goes, but they shouldn't be doing any digging at all on Hilltop Circle. There may be some for electric and some of the conduit that we have to do, but it's going to be very minimal. It should be between probably right around number 19 in that general area. But as far as actually digging up Hilltop Circle itself, there shouldn't be any construction whatsoever out there for us. And the only other thing I'd like to say is, in conjunction with what Angus said about the letter, if anybody at home is listening, personally, I'm requesting a couple of things. First of all, don't go up there while they're doing construction. Stay out of it. That way no one's going to get hurt. Please keep your kids out of there. Again, for the same reason, we don't want them to get hurt. And if anybody has any issues with anything going on up there, do not put it on Facebook. Call us directly. We don't monitor Facebook or any of the social media. We'll never know about it. Call us directly. And we will handle it. I don't care if it's on the weekend, we'll do what we can. But if you put it on Facebook or something like that, we're not going to see it. That's all I'm asking.
If I see it on Facebook, I'll call you.
Okay, that's a deal.
But I agree, I would prefer the advice you
Right,
gave,
right.
that people should call the source.
That's all I ask is call us. We can handle it a heck of a lot faster than trying to go through, well, somebody said this 3 weeks ago. Well, that doesn't do any good 3 weeks ago.
So, Bob, when you say call us,
Call the water department.
okay,
Call the water department, or if it's on the weekend, call the police department. They'll get in touch with us.
okay.
Somehow, during the business hours, there's always somebody here. I'm sure Mike will have his cell phone available and all that kind of stuff if there's any issues. If they don't, they can, go call the police department, call me, whatever there's an issue,
Okay,
please, call us. Don't put it on Facebook.
yeah,
We did talk about adding to the letter to invite people, if they would like to sign up for periodic email updates, that they could do that, and that would be something I would work with Mike Goutet, because I know, my office is kind of, happy to do that, to support the communications for the project. And we'd like to set up a separate page on the town website, so that, because the schedule that will be sent out with the letter is going to be kind of in broad strokes. Obviously, it will continue to be refined as it goes forward, so rather than, having to send things out by mail all these times, we'd like to say, this is where to go for updates, and if you send us your email, then it just facilitates our ability to keep people apprised of what they need to know.
great.
Oh, one other reason I'm interested in the schedule is, obviously, we have quite a bit of money that has already been drawn down, or has been, I shouldn't say drawn down, has already been drawn and is in the town accounts to pay the project costs, but that's not going to cover the full amount. So I've been working with Mike's office and our bond counsel to make sure that we'll have plenty of lead time, because the time will come, we'll need to draw that additional borrowing that was authorized at the April town meeting. Now, remember, that amount is for this and for the well field, so I don't, but the engineers are aware that we need kind of cash flow projections so that we know 6 months ahead of time when they're likely to fully expend the money that we currently have in the bank, so we don't run into a problem. So that's another reason we're interested in the timeline, is the financing side of things.
With the possibility that the interest rates may actually go down in the future, maybe it's waiting to borrow the money isn't so bad.
No, I don't think it's bad at all. We don't want to be paying any interest until.
You don't gonna want to pay the interest anyway, right?
This is, pass that over to you if you want to. It's kind of a doorknob-looking design. What's this?
War of the Worlds.
It's got some interesting features relative to the current tank, I gather, including that the ladder is enclosed inside and they can go right up the middle.
It needs like two big eyes on it, and then it'd be.
Don't make anyone like
Believe me, if the kids get up there during the summer break, they'll take care of that.
So that's literally like, that is sort of a channel in the middle that people can walk, and go up.
There'll be a ladder in the middle so that, you know,
Okay.
that you can get up to,
Get up to the roof.
So no exterior ladder.
Yeah.
And a locked door.
yes.
I would think that would be a serious amount of concrete underneath here. Lot of weight.
Actually, this is one of the smaller ones, how it's dealing with.
Yeah?
Yeah, in order to fit it in, they cut part of the base off because it usually flares out a little bit. They didn't need it that high, so they cut that flare out. And, yeah.
Which the structural engineer assures us will work.
It's all on him if it doesn't.
Well, it's all on, legally, yeah, but water-wise, it's on the town.
Okay, yeah.
When all that water falls on your house,
Yeah, that would
it's a
be
joke,
pretty.
it's not gonna happen. So.
That would not be pretty.
Is the piece gonna be, when you get to that point, is it gonna be helicoptered in or put it assembled on site?
It'd be assembled on site. They'll be bringing in a crane and take it, they'll probably come in on flatbeds piece by
Yeah,
piece.
a bunch of steel plates welded
Bunch of
together.
steel plates welded together and, you know, they'll have a crane up there to put it in place.
But certain of the sections, because it's a smaller one, they actually are gonna be able to manufacture it in-house, under controlled conditions, so it's a cost savings and, you know, probably, you know, easier to, you know, manage than
Right, right,
in the field.
yep.
So they're even able to do some of the painting, pre-painting it, pre-priming it.
Oh,
Right.
wow, that's
So
good,
now,
yeah.
in the facility,
Yep.
and then bring it right to the
Mm.
site.
So when it's painted next year, will there be primer paint after they've assembled it? Will they be, I wonder how much of it will be painted then before the winter?
I don't
I'm sure
remember
they
what
do,
they said.
they know
I-
their prep work and everything. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah.
There's
I think
multiple
Yeah.
coats.
Yeah.
there'll be some sort of a, you know, protective coat on it
Yeah.
before they do the final painting.
Yeah.
There are actually multiple.
Yeah, actually, yeah, multiple.
I think it was 3 coats
Yeah.
total.
Okay, great.
It's been a long process, but it's moving along.
We're getting there.
Great.
So, and the other guy is gonna be okay until this one's done?
Yeah,
There's always
yeah.
that concern, but.
Yeah, no, they won't take the other one down until this one's been completely tested and approved by DEP, and, you know, that won't come down until probably at least a year from now. So,
Okay, thanks.
With Bob here, do you want to jump to car post, maybe?
Sure, okay.
all right.
Okay, so basically, there's two different types of things happening. One we spoke about it a few minutes ago, which is on the organizational side of just looking to clarify or retool the charge of the committee. I think we made some progress at the meeting 2 weeks ago on helping to differentiate between the responsibilities of DPW and my office in terms of just basic property management and oversight, as well as working with the developer of Drake's Landing on coordinating the improvements that they'll be making as part of the condition of that permit. And the committee, which will be, I would think more toward kind of bigger picture and,
Philosophy.
Yeah. So in the meantime, I have been in correspondence with Lynn Spencer, the architect of the firm that did the 2014 study, and through her with the Structures North, the structural engineer. So we're very close to working out an agreement for an initial amount of work to basically get them back on the site. It's been 4 or 5 years since they've been here, to update their advice to us and how to move forward. We will need to incur some modest amount of soft costs initially for that initial meeting and site visit, and then basically, looking to them to advice of, how to get toward some realistic cost estimates to actually do some bricks and mortar work to shore up the building and make it more durable for the longer haul. So I did get a report just this morning from the building commissioner. He does have some real concerns about specifically the chimney and the fact that some bricks have fallen off the building. So he has directed the DPW director to secure the building. So Wayne's looking into how quickly he can get that done. So I expect we'll have continuing updates on that side of things, so I'll continue to keep the board apprised of that. But I think that having a structural engineer re-engaged on the project is going to be really important. So there was another informal meeting.
Can we get actually the same person so that they're a little bit more up
Yes.
to speed
Yep.
before when they start?
Yes, yeah. Lynn was the principal on the design, and then on the engineering side, it was actually I don't have it in these notes, but it's the principal of Structures North. It's the key guy. So he was able to free up. I think they'll both be available to meet. So.
Because that would save a lot of reinventing the wheel. They sort of know what.
Yeah, that's a big part of the benefit, and this is tentative, and something that I expect it would be before the board at your meeting on July 15th is, I know I'd sent out an update earlier today with the idea of proposing CPC administrative funds to support some additional work, because I was able to free up a modest amount of money to kind of support their attendance at a meeting and a limited amount of just updating their thinking, but to really go to the next step of like preparing specifications that could be circulated to potential contractors to get some estimates on what it might cost to deal with whether the roof, the turret, the structural issues, possibly foundation things. To get to where we have any kind of cost, we're going to need to tell people what we're looking for, and that exceeds our capacity. So I think the idea is to get them involved initially, and then to get a cost proposal of what it would take to prepare those kind of specifications, and then ideally bring that to CPC as early as July 18th, with the idea that if that could be paid out of the administrative funds, that wouldn't need to await a town meeting vote. And time is not on our side, so we're kind of hoping that that's the schedule that we're able to.
Is that doable?
Mike has said there's precedent for certain. It's basically, it depends on how it's scoped. I don't want to speak for Mike, but there is some precedent in town for paying.
We did use the administrative funds for the first round here, for the assessment, and.
Oh, we did, okay.
Yeah. So,
Is there enough money in that, in the administrative?
yeah, I mean, the idea is that you're not supposed to do plans or rehabilitation plans. You're just supposed to just
Right.
get an idea of what
Right,
the
so-
current conditions are.
So when does do the funds track fiscal year in the administrative account? Because
Yes, they track
Because we
fiscal
just
year.
recently saw something where at the end of the fiscal year, any unspent funds in the
Administrative side.
administrative side roll into the main fund.
Yes, that's correct.
So is there any way to use any remaining funds before,
Well, I mean,
before the end of the fiscal year?
you could you encumber?
Well,
this
not
fund?
without a vote of the CPC.
Yeah.
So if,
What about the fund
Right.
from the article to bring it?
I think we closed that out.
Yeah.
Are those still hanging on?
yeah, that was closed
That
out.
was closed out.
Okay. Because they weren't all used.
No, they were not.
No, they were not.
Which is another reason to support, doing it, because your town meeting has already voted a certain number.
Exactly, yeah.
But didn't use all of it, so.
But that same money also has to fund everything else, the CPC, it has to fund all the other administrative costs.
Yeah, I mean, a good percentage of those administrative funds are already spoken for through the administrator's time.
Right.
But when you kind of annualize, that pay, there is a certain amount that's available that's not
Okay,
spoken for.
The rest.
But that's going to be entirely up to the CPC
Right.
in terms of whether that's.
Yeah.
but yeah, time's not on that building side
So,
right
so
now.
who,
Yeah, so,
who initiates that with the CPC?
Well, that's something that was talked about a bit at this meeting Thursday evening, which was just more of an informal meeting. Bob was there and Marley and probably a half dozen others, but it wasn't a committee meeting per se. It was a bit more informal. But that question was asked of who would actually be requesting to CPC. And what I've thought is that if at the meeting on the 15th, if I have something for this board's endorsement, I'd like to get something to the CPC prior to the 15th because their meeting's on the 18th. So maybe at the time that your packet goes out, say the prior Friday, the same thing I put in your packet is also going to the CPC marked draft, and then the board, anything that comes out of your meeting Monday evening the 15th, any changes would then be updated to the committee. I'm just thinking out loud.
Okay.
Alternatively, Bob, I don't know, I know you had a historical commission meeting earlier tonight. I don't know if this was part of what they discussed.
I was between two different
Okay.
meetings, so they may have talked about something that I wasn't when I was down there. But that wasn't something that we had talked about while I was there.
I definitely think, the CPC would look for a supportive vote from the Board of Selectmen as representing the ownership of the building.
Okay, but we can't do anything too prematurely because you're gonna have the people give you an idea.
I'm looking to get them out here later this week,
Okay.
and we connected by phone on Friday. I think that could come together.
We could, I mean, if you get something together, we could, if we have to, we could have a quick meeting and just look it over.
I'll let you know as soon as I know something. Just like with the report from Glenn today, I'll try to just keep you fully apprised of that.
Okay.
Could I be part of that when they come out and just? Okay, thanks, I appreciate that.
Okay, I guess we're good on that for the moment. update on a new plan with one sidewalk for the Middle Street Bridge.
Okay, so this is the third round of plans since they had the engineer had initially sent them, and we think this one is more in the ballpark than the earlier two, in that it's got the single sidewalk option. And you can see in here the preliminary estimates of cost are substantial, and there's a couple of material issues. One is getting the public process on track, and specifically trying to get a public meeting scheduled. Earlier this spring, we had agreement with Newburyport of a date and drafted up a press release, but then before that was all sent and advertised, the date was canceled, and it's proving difficult to get that rescheduled. So the public process is, I think it's fair to say, somewhat stalled. The other side of that is the financing of construction, and there's a couple of notes I can offer there. One is, as you know, the board looked at a draft agreement between the two municipalities, which would address cost share, and we've been working to get a meeting with the mayor's office on that. We're aware, we had kind of surmised, but we now know officially that this project didn't emerge well from their budget process in Newburyport. It's pretty low on their list of priorities. So I'm been corresponding today with the mayor's chief of staff, and I'm hoping we can get on the phone together because I think there's some reasons why there is some urgency, even from Newburyport's point of view, that perhaps they're not fully considering. So we're looking to get a meeting of the minds there. And related to that is we have our eye on the MassWorks grant. If we decide to go after the MassWorks grant, there is some funding that is dedicated for communities with less than 7,000 population. So that's the specific pool that we would be aiming at.
Tell me a little bit more about that. So what is the MassWorks grants aiming for?
Well, I haven't done a lot of research on it. I worked on one 4 or 5 years ago when the program was brand new, when they had there used to be 6 different grant programs, and they consolidated them all into a single grant, which I thought was great from a town standpoint. But one of them was Public Works. They were all Public Works related. So the one that we have our eye on is called the STRAP, which I don't know actually what that acronym means, but it's infrastructure improvements. And this portion, we've been advised that the economic development piece is not as critical, which is good because you can't really make a strong case that this serves that benefit. In general, in my experience, the competitiveness for these MassWorks grants is based in part on the Commonwealth's assessment of how the community is advancing the Commonwealth's objectives, including with regard to both economic development and housing. And so we had talked about this last summer because we had been first approached by BSC Group, the engineer, with an offer to assist us on a grant application. And I think I'd briefed the board on that maybe early in my time here. And I said, if we're not implementing our housing production plan, that's not going to help us when the time comes. Like, we need to start showing some forward progress on that. But the engineers have said that the under 7,000 population bucket of money, there's less competition for. Okay. So I'd worked on a MassWorks grant, I think, for the city of Brockton, where they're up against Boston, So all we can do is the best we can do. The grant application deadline is August 9th. And so I'm also looking at that as a reason to really try to press to have this public meeting so we can have some forward motion on the project.
Okay.
The engineer has said in response to a question that I asked him, he didn't think that it was critical that we have the public meeting before August 9th, but we definitely need to.
But it just looks better.
Right. Well, and particularly when the design costs are funded by a DOT grant. And so I think DOT is going to be looking for forward motion on this project. So, bottom line, we're still trying to get an in-person meeting because I think that's the only way we're going to really be able to fully assess where we are. But it's, I guess the good news is we have updated design plans, but it's an open question because it's clear that the city's, it's just not really high on their list. But it raises questions because basically half of the soft cost budget that they got last summer were appropriated for FY19 and roughly half were appropriated for FY20. So there's a lot of soft costs ahead with advancing the engineering. Once there's further along with the design, getting that through permitting, that's going to take quite a while with all of the different entities that need to sign off on this. I mean, that's a lengthy process and costly. So we really need to get clear because the latest information I have from the city as of this morning is basically, no, I'm sorry, actually it's in this email that was in your packet from week before last, is that the engineer is on hold until further notice. So that's not good. But they've got all this money that DOT has given them. So we just need to sit with them and say, look, guys, unless you're looking to give that money back, in which case DOT is probably going to wonder about the first $250,000, give or take, that's already been expended. I don't know. Do we look at, can they transfer that grant to us to administer it to kind of get BSC back on track, or can we change their posture to where they're going to start reinvesting more staff time in Newburyport to move it forward? So basically what we had surmised starting about 6 or 8 weeks ago is proving to be correct.
Meeting Newburyport's stance on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely, in my correspondence with the city, I've been very much appreciative of all the efforts they have made up until 2 months ago. They really had put in a lot of time and effort. They went and got the grant. They got a $500,000 grant. So it's, they've done a lot to get it to this point. But as of, I think it was really, my sense is in their budget process, they just got a clear direction both from the council and through the capital planning process that they just don't see that there's a lot of political or public support on that side of the bridge to dedicate funding in the next few years. I think that's problematic, and I think if we can sit with them, that's not just problematic for us, I think it's problematic for them. And so I think, I think if we work together, we can get it back on track. But we're still in that mode of trying to get a meeting. A daytime meeting, not even the public meeting. That's a bigger effort. So with that said, do you have thoughts on the design plans that are before you?
Well, it looks like there was a reference to the alternative 1B, which was the 24-foot wide roadway with a single sidewalk. And I guess I should use this. Yeah, and that to me makes more sense. I don't see the need for 2 sidewalks there, but I do think, having traveled that bridge frequently, sidewalks on that bridge aren't so much for people walking along the road as they are for kids fishing, and they're not a bad idea. That's the way I see it. That's who's going to be spending time on those sidewalks. That isn't going to be pedestrians walking through. Not just kids, people fishing. A lot of times kids. who sometimes jump out in the roadway without looking, so.
Yeah, at a staff
Yeah,
level,
yeah,
it was absolutely unanimous in both
Yeah.
municipalities. There has to be pedestrian accommodation.
Right, absolutely.
But
Yeah.
two sides, I think everyone felt was overkill.
Yeah,
Especially, it's really, I mean, it ends up being a real cost driver as well. So one sidewalk added,
a little over 400,000, it looks like. And another sidewalk
yep, that's
adds
right.
another, another 400,000.
on top of that, right?
Yeah.
What about in terms of the road width?
I asked about that because it seemed kind of 24 feet seemed kind of wide to me.
I've walked it a few times, and it's the actual, unless the actual road that's there now, beyond on either end of the bridge, is less than 24. It's like 21, 22. The paved surface that's there now. So I'm wondering if we could. I suppose you want to be a little bit bigger, but I mean, making it bigger makes it more expensive. That's all. Just.
Yeah, I was looking at the cost difference, Dave, or Archie, and, it's not, it's, what, $35,000 isn't change, but it's $35,000 difference between the 22-foot and the 24-foot roadway for the same construction type. So there isn't, the extra 2 feet isn't a huge cost center. I agree with you. I mean, I don't, I mean, from one perspective would be that, well, we don't want to turn it into a major roadway. We're trying to retain the country road, country lane character. So it would be kind of odd to go from a, 20 feet or 21 feet wide road to a 24-foot wide travel lane on a bridge. Seems kind of odd.
So which ones are you comparing?
I was
Rick?
comparing this right here. This is the
That's
same
the
construction.
22
this
22-foot
this
road,
spans
yeah.
45-foot span spread box beams with a 22-foot roadway. So this number right here, and then this is the same type of construction, and there's but 2 feet wider. So it's like a $35,000 difference.
But that doesn't have the
With the sidewalk, right. So this is the one with a single sidewalk, the 24-foot wide roadway and a single sidewalk. Yeah, so there's, cost of the sidewalk is.
Oh, okay, so, yeah, I was trying to find, what I was talking about, we don't really sort of have that.
Yeah, what was it you were thinking of?
Well, I was thinking, yes, a sidewalk, but at the.
And I agree with you. I was looking for the same thing. I would have
Yeah.
liked to have seen the same thing, but
Yeah.
it's not there.
It's not there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the sidewalk with the narrow shoulder, is that?
No, 22-foot wide way of travel, or, travel lanes,
Like
and then a sidewalk.
Alternative 2 has a 22-foot wide roadway, but it doesn't have the added, it doesn't have the sidewalk.
Mhm.
So alternative 1B is 24 feet, as Rick makes a good point, adding the couple of a foot or two or more of pavement doesn't seem to change the price very much. The sidewalk changes it
Dramatically,
considerably, yeah. 500,000 basically. 400,000. So again, if that's like you say, for 30,000, why not make it wider? Yeah. certainly safer for people that, if it's a place where people are hanging out, fishing and stuff, if there is a little bit wider, if a oil delivery truck or something is going by, it gives a greater degree
Right.
of clearance.
Well, yeah, I mean, that also though brings up another question, you know, so probably in the last 20 years, well, I would hope in the last 20 years, nobody's gone over that with an oil delivery truck, because it really wasn't built for that. And so now, if the bridge is upgraded, how does that change traffic on that road? Because the
roads is the same.
right, they're the same, but but you could take a 20-ton vehicle on those roads, and you wouldn't fall into a river. But with a new bridge, you could take take another vehicle. I'm just wondering, how's this going to change the character of the road?
The bridge has to be built to the specifications to hold routine a routine truck. I would think 80,000 pounds. Yeah. Oh, you think it's going to change the character of the traffic on the road?
It may.
I don't see it. It's too.
If it were 22, that traffic would travel 24 feet, 22 feet.
Right. No, I understand. It isn't just the bridge width that's going to do that. Yeah.
No, I don't see it becoming a thoroughfare.
No, yeah, and it'll, like Mike said, it'll neck down on either side to the existing lane width. So. But yeah, we're in a bit of an awkward spot because there are design tweaks like that Wayne, and especially Wayne as a traffic engineer, would look at. And,
yep.
But BSC they're not under contract with us. And we're actually, from early on, and I totally respect and agree with this, we were told, don't call them, because I know, every time you do, the meter's running, and
right.
They can't effectively manage the contract if they have other parties calling
Right.
their consultant. So
Right.
I get that entirely. But now that we're told they're kind of in a holding pattern, that puts us in a tough spot, because we might like to, well, how about if you did this or did that? We don't have that level of access at this point to the engineers.
You get the feeling, Angus, that Newburyport do they want a sidewalk, for example?
At a staff level, yes, 100%. And I know the city engineer feels that it would be, it would be bad public policy to not have a sidewalk, given that we know it will be used for people fishing. You have to provide for that, whether it's, so I think, yes, the issue is the funding, obviously. But yeah, if you're going to build it, you need to have accommodation for pedestrians.
Okay. All right, so there's not much more we can do at the moment.
No, we'll keep trying to press at the staff level, and we'll keep the board updated as we have new information. And this MassWorks, I will be coming back to you at the meeting on July 15th, at a minimum to look for a letter of support, and probably to vote to authorize the submittal of that. We could push off the submittal vote until later. The deadline's not till August 9th, so we might wait on that until we're closer to having a complete grant application.
Would we have had to have picked out even what it looks like, or no?
That's what I corresponded with the engineer last week, and I was kind of looking for him.
Because again, no public input.
Right. I think that, so I said, do you agree it would be important to get the public meeting scheduled and held by August 9th in order to be most competitive? And, he said, we do not feel having the public meeting before August 9th is critical. It's much more critical to get as many quality letters of support as possible. He's saying that letters of support carry a lot of weight. I think the real answer is we would be a lot better off to have the public meeting before August 9th. Perhaps the engineer, might be aware of the dynamics and doesn't want I mean, his client is Newburyport, so he's
Yeah,
gonna
right.
be, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think clearly we'd be much better off getting public input, having a preferred design alternative, and having some clarity on what's the path forward on timing and financing.
Okay, you're gonna talk to us about what's happening for the bicentennial.
We are hard at work. The committee is hard at work. We're hard at work. It's a daily focus. Archie, the point that you made at the beginning of the meeting about volunteers, definitely reemphasize that.
Could you also, maybe get a call from the school to get community service hours for any high school students who want to volunteer for this? They have a requirement that they serve so many community services.
Summer vacation.
No harm in asking, yeah. Yeah, we have, we put the call out through the website and the social media, and I know that the committee members were set up over the weekend at the Food Mart, both selling tickets to the Friday night dance as well as soliciting volunteer support. So they have a meeting Wednesday night that I'm planning to attend. So there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, I could, you know, we were dealing with permits for the electrical generators and certificates of insurance for all the vendors, and we got to get some clarity on the food and how that's going to be handled for the field day. There was a bit of a issue last week with the license for the movie night, because there's pros and cons of the different ways you can license movies. So there's a lot of detail work that's we're kind of right in the thick of. I think it's going to be, you know, tremendous events, really good. But I know, you know, at a staff level, myself and Chief Durand and Wayne and his crew, we're all, you know, and Mike Dwyer, of course, he's out for a little while, but we're all trying to think through what have we not thought of, and there's a lot of that. So.
Can I ask you any more information on the shuttles?
We had advised that the committee secure shuttles for the field day. It's my understanding that they have. I haven't seen the actual agreements, but it's been represented to me that they have gotten quotes and that they have a vendor lined up to provide shuttle service on the day of the field day. The thinking is to just use this location.
During the daytime too, or just the fireworks?
That's where I don't have that level of clarity yet. But the thinking is to just use this location for the satellite parking, and that if on the day of this somehow got inundated, they could then extend it down to the high school, but rather than advertising that both places will be available, because then you have to run the shuttle all day because you've told everyone that's a remote parking place. So instead it was decided, identify this area in Action Cove and as the satellite parking area, and then if on the day of it's overrun, then you can always extend the shuttles rather than having the shuttles have to do the full route all day.
That's not a bad idea, right?
So one thing, you know, I would love to have, if we're having this as satellite parking area, I would love to have somebody stationed here, ideally two volunteers stationed here, so when people drive up, there's some visible, yep, this is the right place, you know. That all depends on bodies and having volunteers. If we don't have volunteers, we'll try to do it with signage.
And people can also park at Page School,
Yeah, that'll be where people will go first.
and you'll have a detail crossing them across the street.
Yep, the details, police detail will be set up all day and night at the pedestrian crossing, and that'll be illuminated. They've arranged for the portable lighting.
What's the parking capacity at Page?
Oh, gosh, I had the numbers in the packet a couple of weeks ago.
I thought it was 200.
I think that's in the neighborhood, yeah, but we had it down
That's
to
including out back behind the
Yes,
Yeah,
including
yeah,
Outback,
yeah.
Yep. But I will say, there's a ton of details, and it's,
Yeah.
you know, competing against other fiscal year-end things, and it's part of why we're working a lot of hours these
Right,
days,
right.
so. A big part, actually.
Final thing,
Uh,
stormwater.
Stormwater, this kind of closes the loop on updates you've been getting since last summer. As you know, this is the first year of the 5-year permit. The town is the permittee, and so we have a bunch of milestones that we're required to meet by the end of the year. If you look back at the memos I wrote you back in August and September and October, this is all consistent with what we have known to be coming our way. There's a ton of detail behind this that I didn't bore you with, but each of these is policy document, or, you know, kind of standard operating procedure. So the way it's turned out, with Wayne being new to the department and with Wayne being kind of a guy who likes standard written procedure, it's kind of, as some of what he's needing to do for this permit, he was already doing. For example, coming up with a map of the plow routes in town. He already would have done that if we had to do a permit or not, because it helps him with his thinking. It's how he thinks about things. So some of the work he's done kind of helps him just better document how the department does what it does. But there's a lot of, he has been putting in a lot of work. We did contract with Horsley and Witten because it became clear a couple of months ago we couldn't possibly do this without consultant support, which actually, in fairness, was clear last August, and I did present that to the board, but it wasn't in the budget, and it would have needed a special article at town meeting, which would have been a tough sell in October to go to the town and look for 20 grand for a consultant. But the fact is, we have had to divert money that otherwise would have gone into, you know, streets and sidewalks and trees to fund consultant support, because there's just it's a huge unfunded mandate. If I sent you some of the threads and the level of detail that Wayne is needing to respond to, very specific things, which I knew. I mean, we did that.
I mean, we have a relatively small, uncomplicated municipality.
They have found a way to make it complicated. The
No,
EPA.
no, but
yeah.
how does, you know, Methuen or some really big place?
They have
How do they do
six-figure contracts with third-party consultants. This MS4 is a huge boon to these civil engineering firms. They make all kinds of money helping, you know, the communities comply with the EPA requirements. It's a huge industry. I mean, in Maine, we had, there was the company we used up there was a spin-off that used to be part of a bigger firm. This guy spun off, created his own thing 5 or 6 years prior to when I started there, and he had a little cottage industry, and all he did was help towns not just with this stuff, but with their annual reports. We got an annual report due September 30th, which I can tell you from my time in Hamden when I was right in the thick of it for a similar sized community. It's a bunch of work. And so some of when you look at like our Facebook feed, and you'll see every now and then postings on stormwater, I do that because it's useful to people, but also because that's part of how we demonstrate to EPA that we are doing education and outreach on stormwater. Those are things that it's not just I post it and I save it to a server, so when the time comes, it's part of our documentation that we're meeting our permit. And that's just, I mean, that's one little instance, but, you know, questions like you have to, you know, estimate, or actually you have to document with your annual street sweeping program, how much sediment's getting into your catch basins, how much are you extracting from your catch basins, where are you disposing of those materials. You need to provide your shipping slips that they've gone to where you said that. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so you look at a Department of Public Works with 10 hours a week of administrative support, it's actually 8. You know, it's very, very tough. It's a big lift. So,
You know, it's interesting that Merrimack River Task Force, or I'm trying to recall what the exact name of the organization was, but it was when Lenny Muir was here last meeting, he referenced it, and I happened to have gone to that meeting. And there was a presentation there by an engineer who had sort of been in this area for a long time, I can't recall his name or the name of his firm, but he had been monitoring or participating in the process of monitoring of the river and water quality for a long period of time. And so we talk about CSOs, from cities upriver, starting Manchester, New Hampshire, and then Nashua and Lowell and Lawrence and Haverhill and all the other large entities, and we think of that as being the major problem. But based on the data he was showing, it appeared as though non-point sources, distributed runoff, this stuff that's being controlled here, is roughly equal in its impact on the river. And so it's a lot of work, no question about it, a lot of detail, a lot of but it's if his data is right, then it's as important as dealing with the CSOs.
Well, that's where this whole so-called Phase 2 stormwater regs all came from. It was, the Clean Water Act went in place in the early 70s, and then decades went by, and the feds were like, the water quality isn't improving as quickly as it should.
Yeah.
And then they started looking at the non-point source pollution.
Right.
And that's very decentralized because that's not federal jurisdiction. Federal government doesn't sign off on land use permits, but what it is you get all this development with all this impervious surface, and the old mentality on stormwater not that long ago was get it downstream, get it out, just get it into the pipe and hard pipe it down, and that's all changed now. Right. And so one example of the kind of work that this creates, which is going to be less here because we don't see a lot of development, but up in Hamden was a big deal, was anytime we approved a project within our urbanized area, we had to require that the developer meet certain standards on compliance in their design and operations. So for instance, we had to impose on the private developer these operations and maintenance plans that they then had to do on an annual basis. We were required as a condition of our permit to get annual reports from that landowner. And that was part of our annual report. So we were basically sub-agents of the EPA. So every, gas station, every, new store, every pizza shop, and so we had mom and pop businesses. There was one that was redeveloping up there, and we had to sit and explain with them, you need a stormwater management plan. They're like, we've had this site for 30 years. We're just rebuilding it. It's like, well, that's a trigger, and we had to explain it because people don't like regulation in that part of the world.
Right.
And we were, often seen as the bad guys. And it's like, we're mandated to do this. And they said, well, they don't really know. It's like, no, they really do know. And like our annual reporting to DEP, you had to document that you had, the operation and maintenance plans and records of every private development within your area. I mean, it's unbelievable. And it's not bad stuff. It's all for the right reason. But it's like towns are fundamentally not staffed to do this, but we have to do it. So I wrote my graduate thesis on this very topic.
Yeah, really? Okay.
I'll send it to you. You'll love it. It's pretty good. But you're right, non-point source pollution is...
It's a big deal,
and
it's all over, and we all do it. And most of us don't even know we do it, but we contribute, Yeah. Big lawns, lots of fertilizer, stuff like that.
Okay.
I do have a punch list of draft items for the next agenda, if you want me to just run down that quickly.
Okay.
Here it is. So for draft open session topics, the tree committee proposal, The Bicentennial Committee is looking for suggestions on where to bury time capsule on somewhere in public land. We had a really good meeting, Mike and I, with Glenn Kemper in his capacity as Cable Advisory Committee czar. Three of us met with the Verizon guys about, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. A really good meeting. So I don't know if that'll come together for the next agenda, but it's kind of on my placeholder for future agendas. I think we'll move pretty quickly toward approving that contract. Car Post Committee charge. We are going to look to clarify something that came out of last summer's meeting on the water tank, which is the traffic flow on Hilltop Circle, because this board had set one way around the circle, and it looks like the Water Commission might think the other way is better. So either way is fine. We just need to make sure we're clear on that, because we have to advertise that in the paper for it to become effective. I was thinking I'd like to put to the board to review office hours for the year, because we post them, and I thought that would be a good thing to get in the practice of reviewing. And then FY20 holiday recognition schedule, you may remember we did that last fall. The town hadn't done it in the past, but it's a lot better to just at the beginning of the fiscal year, here are the holidays, here's the days that they will be recognized in terms of closures, and just do it for the whole year instead of, when I started, it was like every holiday. So I always did this in Hamden. It's just vote it in July, and that way everyone knows. So, and then we'll also be talking about, potentially bridge memorandum of agreement with Newburyport, knock on wood.
Somehow I have to bump that up in their mind.
Yep. I've got a strategy. I just need to get to FaceTime with the mayor, because I think we have some compelling points. But I can totally understand from where they're sitting and all the stuff they're dealing with. It's,
Right.
If we can, Angus, if you can get something from the people if you're able to meet with them this week on what the people from looking at the car posts think they could see, then the sooner we can get that ball rolling. But
Understood.
I'm sure they can't get back to you that quickly.
We connected by phone on Friday. We talked for about 45 minutes. Wayne was part of that. It was a really good call. So I'm just waiting for them to, follow up with the business terms. But I think it's not unrealistic that we can get a meeting this week based on. Lynn does some work in, I believe she said in Hamilton, somewhere in this general vicinity, and so she was thinking if she could combine it with a trip up here anyway, that could work out this week. So I expect to know one way or the other tomorrow.
Rick, anything that you want to place on future agendas?
No, I'm going to, Angus had talked to you, we talked a couple times about trying to get together and talk for a few minutes. We'll make some notations on, your outline of things that to look into, to address in the future. I, do have some things on my mind, but nothing that I'd like to speak about now.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.